In 1914, Queensland Railway's Chief Mechanical Engineer Charles Pemberton designed the 480 C18 class. This, along with his successor John Edmund Robinson's upgraded version, the C19, became QR's largest rigid-frame steam locomotives. Pemberton's first C18, number 692, arrived just in time to celebrate the railway's jubilee from the 25th to the 28th of February 1914. It was displayed with A10 number 3 in Market Square, part of which was located on what is now King George Square. Only 3 C18s were built, numbers 692, 693 and 694, the latter two being superheated and receiving nameplates. Railway Commissioner Charles Evans decided to reinstate the practice of naming engines after a trip to Europe. 693 and 694 named Sir William and Lady McGregor respectively, in honour of the then Queensland Governor-General and his wife. Number 692 was not given nameplates, but was referred to by her nickname Sylvia Parkhurst, a women's rights activist at the time. Owing to an increase in traffic and planned extensions to the North Coast line from Bundaberg to Mackay, and not being able to overcome the restrictions imposed by the lightly laid rail, wooden bridges as well as draw gear limitations, Robinson's C19 was given preference over larger articulated locomotives. The first C19, number 695, rolled out the door of Ipswich workshops on the 26th of September 1922. 10 C19s built at Ipswich, 695 to 704, were in service by the end of 1923, when their 100th locomotive, number 702, entered service in December of that year. It was later given the name Centenary in June of 1924. A further batch of 10, 792 to 801, were added to the class over the next 4 years, 801 not being completed till January 1928. 6 more Walkers-built engines, number 198 to 201, would complete a total of 26 in the class, 201 entering service on the 11th of September 1935. The first 3 original C18s were later converted to larger cylinders when boiler refits were done and reclassed as CC19s. April of 1915 saw the Southern Line become available to these engines. Number 694 was the first engine to run over the Drayton Deviation on the 5th of July 1915. This line was constructed to provide a more direct path between Toowoomba and Warwick instead of the old main line via Gowrie. On the 5th October 1958, she worked the last passenger train over the superseded route between Gowrie and Wairima prior to its closure. Originally designed for heavy mail trains and important North Coast traffic, their most prestigious roles were on trains carrying members of the royal family. Number 693, with the royal coat of arms on the smokebox and the Prince of Wales fleur-de-lis attached to the tender, hauled Prince Edward VIII on his visit to Queensland in 1920 from the 26th of July to the 5th of August. Prince inspected the engine at Warwick and complimented driver Martin on his abilities at handling the locomotive. Number 699 hauled the Duke and Duchess of York, later King George VI and the Queen Mother of England, from Wollongara to Brisbane on the 5th to the 6th of April 1927. And in December 1934, number 700 hauled the Duke of Gloucester and party from Stanthorpe to Brisbane, then to Nambour and returned to Rocklea. The contract, awarded to Walkers in 1935 to build the last 6 engines, coincided with the inauguration of QR's new long-distance passenger train, the Sunshine Express. They hauled this service until superseded by the newer B18 1/4 Pacific class engines. This photo of the Sunshine Express at Roma Street was taken on the 30th of November 1940. The decorations were commemorating the opening of the new station at Roma Street, platforms 1, 2 and 3, for long-distance trains. The Sydney Wollongara Mail, with 240 tonnes, was worked up the main range unassisted, and 285 tonnes for a goods train. 435 tonnes was achieved when regularly banked by a C16 or C17. They also hauled the Western Mail as far as Roma, on the Western Line, 650 tonnes on goods trains, was easily handled to and from Chinchilla, except for the foothills near Toowoomba. The Townsville Mail was worked as far as Rockhampton, with 295 tonnes down to Gympie and 320 to 390 tonnes on various sections north of there. Through loads of 500 tonnes were carried with the help of a PB-15 banker for the Blackall Range and the climb into Gympie. North of Bundaberg, it was common to have a PB-15 as an assist engine. In 1958, load tables were changed to reflect the heavier tonnages allowable due to the upgraded draw gear and improved bridge strength. Thus, a theoretical maximum load of 985 tonnes for a C19 would have been possible, but was never tested. During the 1938-1948 coal strikes, engines were fired on wood, necessitating the fitting of spark arresters on chimneys. The class had their fair share of accidents, faults, failures, derailments and collisions, one being C19-702 after colliding with the rear of a train at Brunswick Street Station on the 20th of October 1927. Some accidents were not recorded officially, such as this one of C19-198, seen here after striking a wagon that had been left foul in Dalby on the 14th of December 1952. The class were originally worked from Brisbane as far north as Bundaberg. And west to Toowoomba. With the extension of the North Coast Line and upgrades to track and bridges, they were eventually permitted to run as far as Bowen, although rarely worked past Mackay, west to Roma and south to Wollongara on the Southern Line. Engines were allocated to several major depots including Ipswich, Toowoomba, Maryborough, Rockhampton, and the majority stationed at Maine. By the 1950s, these magnificent engines had been relegated to more mundane work. They could be found on mixed goods, livestock, coal, fruit and grain trains, and transfer shuttles between the major shunting yards such as Main and Roma Street. They were worked hard during the war years and suffered from lack of maintenance. Running men had mixed feelings when asked to recall their time working the class. Some said they were good engines for their power and didn't tend to get stuck or slip much. Others said how rough they were and how they had to stand on the tender when not firing, because of the cab had a tendency to wag from side to side with the motion of the pistons. Their big ends would knock and pound hard because of their worn state. Most said they were fireman killers when they steamed poorly due to bad coal, leaking or blocked tubes. A shift of 19 hours to and another 19 hours from Roma Street due to poor steaming and subsequent sitting in every siding was told to me by ex-Gympie driver John Bartholomew. Whatever the experience of crews was, some must have had a soft spot for them, as they were nicknamed Bulls by the northern divisions and Ocean Liners by some of the southern. Number 196, seen hauling wagons to Roma Street, had some cheeky employee write "Little Toot" on the smokebox door. Presumably now because it was relegated to being a shunt engine. In their prime, at the head of the premier mail trains, some drivers would attach a silver star to the smokebox door as a sign of individual pride, letting people know who was driving. As the 1950s came to a close, most had been withdrawn, although owing to loco shortages, some like 200, 201 and 798 were returned to service. Their last workings were on the workers' shuttle between Willoughburn and Toowoomba yards. A youthful Bill Bowden being one of the last to fire 700, which was withdrawn on the 18th of March 1964. Most of these engines would meet their final demise at Ipswich and Redbank, where they were cut up for scrap. Number 800 would outlast the rest of its class members as a steam cleaner at Maryborough till 1966, when it was unceremoniously hauled to Redbank for scrapping. .700 was born under a lucky star, and in 1968, after sitting for 4 years forgotten in the corner of the roundhouse at Willoughburn, was brought to Ipswich to receive a coat of paint before being plinth at Redbank Locomotive Museum, along with other examples of withdrawn steam locomotives. The following is a chronology of their last months in service, from the first to the last withdrawn from service. Some were still being used for a short time before being condemned. C19 was the first taken out of service in February 1953, followed by 796 in March and 698 and 792 in October 1954, 697 in January, 200 in February, 199, 795 and 800 in March, 699 in April, 703 in June and 793 in December 1955. 799 in March and 695 in June 1956, 197 and 704 in May, 198 and 701 in June 1957, 797 and 801 in March and 201 in June 1958. 693 was the only loco taken out of service in December 1959. 1960 saw some locomotives return to active duty as there was a bumper wheat crop and increase in traffic. The 694 was officially stored in July 1961. 196 Little Toot was withdrawn in January, 696 in April, 702 in May, 794 and 798 in June of 1962. Condemned dates in approximate order. 792, 795, 796 on the 7th of June 1955, 692, 697, 698, 699, 703, 793 and 800 on the 5th of April 1956, 695, 8th of September 1957, 197, 198, 199, 200, 701, 704, 799, 9th of September 1957, 200, 9th of September 1957, after it had been returned to service in May 1956. 801, 1st of April 1958, 797, 15th of April 1958, 201, 28th of May 1958, after it had been returned to service in September 1957, 693, 17th of February 1960, 694, 22nd of September 1961, 196, Little 2, 696, 702, on 28th of May 1962, 794, 28th of June 1962, 798, 3rd of August 1962, and 700, 18th of March 1964. And so was the end for the C19.
To be condemned. That was 6 months ago. After 1,500,000 miles, I, Lady MacGregor, was next in line, waiting to be scrapped. It had to come, for the swift, powerful diesels were taking over, and soon we would all disappear. 1,500,000 miles. 48 years of hard toil behind me, but it has its memories. Once I was the pride of the road, named after the First Lady of Queensland, the Governor's wife. I had served royalty. I had pulled the Brisbane-Wollongara Express mail train for many years. Yet, strangely enough, the one memory which is most cherished is our last run. Like any other morning, I waited under a full head of steam for Chris and Stan, who would be my crew. I knew also that this would be Chris's last run, for he too was getting old and had to retire after 50 years' service. When he climbed aboard, I knew what he was thinking, for Chris and I were old friends. How he would run his eye over me and care for me, even to the point of fussiness. Many times had I felt that gentle way he eased the throttle for the start of our working day. It was a short run from the roundhouse to pick up our train, not the red gleaming passenger express coaches of other days. Today we're running goods. There were no farewells, no one to see us off, but it meant a lot to Chris and me. Well, this was it. There was nothing exciting, Nothing spectacular, no thrills. It was just, well, just the last run. We were to go down the great dividing range and back again, shunting at all stations. Monotonous work, but very necessary. As usual, we waited for the flyers, the swift diesels. It was progress, I suppose, but they seemed somehow cold, lifeless things. There was no warm hiss of steam, no red-hot glow from the firebox. There was no warm, pulsating atmosphere of the cab, no rattle of coal on shovel, nor cold wind on face, no smell of warm steam, oil and smoke. Even the passing salutations seemed different. Chris and Stan were a good crew. The time spent on that extra polish of brass controls, the regular oiling of conrods, and the 101 things which showed their love for the old girl, as they called me, and which made me give of my best. There would be another stop here, waiting for the long diesel cattle train coming up the range, going west. But this was only a single track, and I knew Stan would boil the billy for smoko. On this job, a meal was snatched when and where you could get it. This cattle train was 3 times as long and twice the strength of us. We were back numbers, old-fashioned, being swept aside. Just as the sailing ships gave way to steam, it was our turn. The price of progress. On again to the rhythm of hissing steam, the drive of piston, the squealing clatter of wheels on the seemingly never-ending permanent way. As we pounded along the tracks, my thoughts went back to those bygone days. The days when children would run to the rail fence and wave to us as we proudly passed by with a roar like thunder. But alas, nowadays it's the jet engine and spacecraft that gets this attention. In the old days, everybody and everything went by rail. Wool, grain, cattle, machinery, all went by rail, for there were no bitumen roads, very few motor cars, and a trip to Brisbane by road was an adventure. Of the mail train in any town was a major event. The platform would be crowded with people, excited passengers, and people who came just to bid bon voyage and to show off their best Sunday clothes. What noise, what hustle and bustle of loading and unloading luggage, of men selling papers, fruit and chocolate, and the children as they walked up the platform to gaze in wide-eyed wonder at the monster of steam that was to take them on their holidays. The excursion trains and public holidays crowded to capacity, going to the picnic. But now, smooth roads, fast cars and buses and aircraft have taken all the glamour from us old steam relics. At the city, we got rid of our load and picked up another train for the home run. We coaled and took water. Once more, Chris fussed around me with his unhurried but thorough attention. On the way back, we were a fairly heavy train, which meant the usual slow progress. It was hard, tiring work, for this was a stiff grade, 36 miles to climb 1,600 feet up the range. There was plenty to think about. The sharp curves made the fish plate swing underfoot. Here, Stan showed his worth. To shovel coal into my hungry mouth in that swaying, lurching cab was an art on its own. Shoveling to my never-ending call of heavy beggar, heavy beggar, heavy beggar, heavy beggar, heavy beggar. Not far to go now. We're almost at the top of the range. This road up the range is a masterpiece of railroad engineering. Deep cuttings along the mountainsides 11 tunnels in 11 miles, built before the turn of the century, when the primitive bush and conditions called for almost superhuman efforts from workmen with little else than pick and shovel for tools. The home signal. It seemed significant that we arrived home in time to see one of the last steam passenger mail trains going west. But she, like me, would not last much longer. The last mile to the roundhouse. There were no brass bands to welcome us, nor to say farewell. Only a friendly sign from Joe in the signal cabin. But to Chris and me, it meant so much, for we were saying goodbye to steam and goodbye to each other. And so, the last turn of the conruns in that 1,500,000 miles. Chris to his garden and flowers, and I to the scrap heap.
but yet